everyone. My name is Michael Goff, and I'm Principal Product Marketing here at Revenera, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar from subscription to tokens and beyond, designing hybrid software monetization with confidence. Today, we're joined by Forrester Principal Analyst Lily Varon. Lily's going to lead a level-setting discussion on how software monetization strategies are evolving and what this evolution means for product organizations. She'll explore how software companies are evolving their strategies to monetize AI effectively while managing complexity across their quote-to-cash stack, highlighting where there may be overlap and where clarity can reduce execution friction. Before we get started, though, let's go over a few housekeeping details. First, today's discussion will be roughly 45 minutes long, and if you have any questions or comments, please add them in the chat tab, and we'll try to answer them as we go along or at the end if time allows. And don't worry, if we don't get to your questions, we will follow up with you individually after the event. Also, please be sure to check out the Docs tab. We have shared a number of resources that are highly relevant to today's topic that I think you will get a lot out of. And finally, we will be sending you a link to the recording in the next 48 hours. So before we jump into things, I want to make sure that I'm not making any assumptions and let you know who Revenera is and what we do, really more for context. So Revenera helps technology vendors accelerate time to value and monetize what matters. Our solutions help you drive top-line revenue with modern software monetization and understand usage and compliance with software usage analytics. So how do we do that? Our software monetization platform enables you to manage entitlements, compliance, and usage deeply integrated with your quote-to-cash processes and is used as a single source of truth of what is owned versus what is being used. And we're instrumented into your applications and enable license and usage tracking for embedded on-prem, cloud, and SaaS products, SaaS and AI monetization, which of course overlaps with licensing and usage tracking, and compliance and enforcement to address piracy, overuse, and tampering. So with that context, very happy to bring up on the stage Lily Varon. Lily, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. And that's really important context because we're going to get into kind of the boundaries between solutions and some of the business problems they solve. So understanding where Revenera comes at this is really helpful. Anyway, I'm thrilled to talk about this topic. It's all the rage. Certainly, it's something that is on top of a lot of software companies' minds and on the minds of the vendors making technology that enables monetization. So let's get into sort of how AI is changing our monetization strategies. Well, first, let's establish that this is happening, right? We are embedding AI into our products. Our data, when we survey product managers and portfolio marketing folks, we ask them, how much of your, do you embed Gen AI in your products? And 84% of product managers, of these people, of portfolio marketers and product managers, say that AI is embedded into their products. 84%. And this is pretty astounding, given the fact that this is a concept that wasn't really part of the mass awareness as of 3 years ago. And we anticipate, we asked the same group, do you think, what is the impact that Gen AI will have on your products in the next 12 months? And 82% of them said it will continue to have a major impact on our products over the course of the next year. Why does this matter? Why are we even talking about this? Well, because AI demands that we approach monetization differently. When an AI system, especially in this moment in time, as we think about the trajectory of the technology and the maturation of the technology, you probably have heard, if you're paying attention to AI at all, about this move from Gen AI to agentic, right? And that conversation is simply about the autonomy with which the software can operate. So in an agentic scenario, the AI shoots off another set of code that can take action independently and autonomously. The more that this happens, and we're on this maturation curve, the more that this happens, this activity is happening by definition independent of a human user, right? And so one human can take a lot more action theoretically within the domain of this artificial intelligence. And so there's less correlation between the human seat, the seat, and the value of the solution. So we're seeing folks break away from this, and the reason that we're sort of stressed about it, or the reason that it becomes it is such a hot topic, is that things are moving really, really fast. The underlying costs of the technology is sort of an arbitrated value right now, subsidized by a lot of venture capital funding, and so we're trying to figure out the exact way to budget, right? Famously, a few public companies, said that they blew through their AI budgets within their annual AI budgets within a few months of the year, right? We don't have control yet of this sense of how much it costs, how much we're going to use, and the more autonomous it gets, and even with generative AI, the sort of classical generative AI, it gets fuzzy about determining kind of the ROI, the value that these tools are giving to our customers, and the business value that it has for us. I love the point here that actually Revenera made, in where you can see that we're citing some of Revenera's data. The software sellers lean today on subscriptions, a very predictable, and it represented a big transformation from our sort of licensing and this perpetual kind of licensing that we were dependent on or sort of using before. And when we think about the future, subscriptions aren't going away, but we're definitely seeing this sort of shift toward more hybrid monetization. We're going to see more on that. And I think, Michael, am I right that the monetization monitor is in the docs, so folks can see this data and more?
Definitely download the full report. Yeah.
So Revenera's data validates this. Our data validates this. So when we ask these product managers, like, how are you monetizing the Gen AI of your products today? 50% say that they're going with a hybrid approach, whether it be subscription and usage, or subscription and outcome. We'll talk more about outcomes in a while. But what I thought was fascinating is when I cut this data, and later in the survey we ask about how much of AI is in your product, or do you have some Gen AI in your product, no Gen AI in your product, all of your majority of your products are Gen AI embedded, or all of your products. I took that group that says Gen AI is in all of our products, and so this is what we might call, and what I'll call for the rest of this call, like AI companies, and those AI companies are more likely to monetize based on outcome-based models, which is really interesting. A third say that they do more above and beyond other companies. And what I think is interesting about that is, I think in the early days, right, the services industry has been trying to do outcome forever, right? The implementers and the agencies. And it's been a little bit more painful. We'll talk about that in a second too. But the AI companies have really begun this as soon as they start sort of building autonomy into their products, they start thinking about outcomes very, very quickly. And they try to build, in the early days, binary outcomes, right? Something like a ticket resolution was a very common, very sort of big early mover in sort of AI monetization based on outcomes. Was this customer service ticket resolved? Yes or no? And then the solution solving that problem would be monetized based on those number of resolutions. But we're maturing that now, and we'll get into that in a second. What I think is interesting in general, though, when we ask these companies what their predominant pricing strategy is across all of their products, what is driving the monetization, and we cut that by the amount of AI in their product, we see a really interesting shift here, which is AI companies have a much more diversified approach. So they're much less likely to be concentrated on values-based pricing. They have consumption-based pricing, cost-plus based pricing, which is a hot topic at the moment, right? For AI is like token cost plus, sort of a margin. Values-based pricing and competitor-based pricing. We see a lot of reactivity in my competitor does something, I'm reacting. I'm including this for free, or I'm monetizing based on that, or I'm my premium version, or I'm splitting my strategy, and the AI companies respond in kind. What I think is another interesting sort of point here is that AI companies are more likely than other companies to sort of anchor the center of gravity for their pricing or their monetization strategy is much more likely to be consumption-based pricing than anyone else, right? I frankly, if I'm being honest with you, was surprised that cost plus wasn't higher here, but I think the big takeaway is when we think about the predominant monetization strategies for AI companies, it is highly diversified, but they are more likely than others to rely on consumption for this. And I think that's because it builds a foundation for some of that outcome-based pricing, or determining what value is when value is perhaps a bit more nebulous or evolving. So establishing that how AI is impacting our monetization strategies, what does this evolution mean for our technology? One of my favorite pieces that came out of this study was that monetization is hard. Monetization is hard. We asked, a bunch of different tasks, how difficult would you rate this task? And it's interesting to see the balance, the scale tips towards difficult or neutral. And when we look at the companies monetizing on usage or on outcomes, they're more likely to say that monetization is hard. The idea here being, I think, or let's say the hypothesis for what's driving this, I think, is technology readiness, right? Do you have the technology in place to execute this monetization strategy? But also the strategy piece, which is, I don't know what unit of measurement to use, or I don't know what outcome is best attributed to my product. And so I think that there's both elements to this, but it's interesting to see that those who are monetizing based on usage, those who are using outcomes are having a bit more difficulty with their monetization than others.
And which is interesting, Lily. Yeah, I was just going to say,
go back to that.
Yeah, I think that it really depends on, are you an AI native company or a more mature company that's offering AI functionality? If you're AI native, it may be easier for you to get at what that value, what that outcome looks like, because it's very tunnel vision, narrow focus.
The aperture is smaller, yeah.
As opposed to a more mature company whose definition of value really depends on individual customers, individual organizations that are getting value out of it. And I would agree with you. I think the hard part of monetization is all the work you need to do before you are ready to implement that model, right? There's a lot of work that needs to be done to understand, where are people getting value? What does that usage look like? What does adoption look like? So I'm not surprised that people find monetization hard, or hybrid monetization even harder. But I do think it depends on what type of company you are. Even, traditional software versus, is your AI embedded in a device? Where's that AI value taking place? Is it in the cloud? Is it on a device? Different cost structures, things like that. So, Very interesting.
There's an interesting that validates this data too. Going back to this slide, I think, when we think about perhaps the companies that have more of a diversified product portfolio or are more mature companies, maybe have bigger product management teams or more R&D around this, maybe their attribution of value is easier. And so that's part of why we might see them over index on that value-based pricing. And where we are in the I mean, I think this is going to be a fun one to take the pulse on kind of year over year over year over year, because as we build more autonomy into AI, how do we attribute value to it? And the kind of need becomes more urgent to attribute that value to. We'll get to that too. We'll talk about that a bunch in a bit. But I want to say I don't want to induce panic, right? We're already and have been kind of transforming our systems. But it's part of the reason why monetization is hard, right? But we've been here before. When we moved from the perpetual licenses to subscription, it broke the kind of established operating model. It broke the functionality that we might need, the kind of flexibility, the decoupling of capabilities in our catalogs, in our billing products, frankly, everywhere. We needed to kind of redesign and re-architect our business applications, and the vendors needed to re-architect their solutions for solving a more circular life cycle, a more recurring life cycle, a retention-based mindset rather than an acquisition-based mindset or model. So subscriptions kind of exposed the rigidity of some legacy solutions that were based on pricing on perpetual licensing. And what we see with usage and consumption is kind of a similar thing. We're breaking the confines of a rigid kind of flat-based recurring. It's wild, the transformation in the last 10 years to think of, subscription being the thing that broke us free of the confines of a perpetual license model. Well, now similar story about usage and consumption, sort of breaking the confines of this rigid flat rate subscription. Now, what we saw in our data, and what I don't want to overcorrect here and say, subscriptions are not going away, right? We see this hybrid monetization as kind of a really interesting and important critical foundation for today and into the future. But what we need is folks that can manage hybrid, and there's very few systems, right? Many of the systems were built perhaps subscription native, and now for software monetization, and now are building in more usage and consumption support. Or you've got folks who were industry specialists where usage and consumption was the de facto model, breaking into new industries. But what we've been in this, we've seen this before. Let's not panic, right? All of that, the talk of CPQ to quote to cash, or sales ops and marketing ops to rev ops, all of this sort of transformative stuff, we live in it, right? We live and breathe it. We've been doing this. So I don't want to induce that panic. But what I will say is that the transformation does end up making a kind of confusing technology landscape to navigate, because you have systems that are moving up and downstream to kind of mitigate integration challenges, or to improve kind of like data integrity for different processes. And so naturally, these solutions who are great fits to solve the modern day problem in, let's say, usage and consumption will build what their customers need up and downstream to make the middle work better, right? And so what we've got is this kind of messy middle. Well, I didn't come up with that, but this idea of we've got front office technology, right? Front office being about the things that your customers either use and touch, see and feel, or your admin, your business users do. But it's essentially these things that enable the sales and engagement with your customers. And then this sort of back office, which is about operations, efficiency, and compliance, which you cannot, the problem of enabling incredible creativity in the front office to sell whatever price bundle package you want, or entitlements, right, that you design, but you don't have the kind of middle or back office to enforce or to ensure that it's compliant with accounting standards or things like that. That's the broken piece that the messy middle tries to solve, right? The messy middle goes up and downstream to connect these things better, to make sure that you enable front office creativity, but without violating kind of the back office compliance. It's necessary, but it is a bit confusing. One of the ways that it is confusing is that there is overlapping functionality between some solutions, and these are some of the common ones. So as this up and downstream movement happens with monetization solutions, the most common kind of overlaps in functionality certainly include the kind of actual UI, the actual glass that you're using. As headless solutions and API-centric solutions have come about, there's sort of nesting and kind of Russian dolls of applications between, you might be using a CRM or some other solution, but the billing vendor might be owning, or the entitlement vendor might inject data necessary for the operation in the CRM. But also, where do buyers and sellers go in to self-administer, to understand the state of their account? That is common overlap. You'll see a lot of offerings for that, for this portal, for the UI. The product catalog, where are product attributes defined? Where are they held? What is the system of record of product? Many solutions across the monetization stack will enable a kind of native product catalog for the rest of the monetization to work effectively. Pricing, similar, right? System of record for pricing. Where's the pricing rule defined? Where's the rating? Well, rating is another area. We'll get to that in a second. But like, where is this pricing logic defined? Where is it applied? A lot of the monetization stack naturally will have some pricing capabilities, though exactly how it manifests might be slightly different. Customer entitlements. We're going to talk about the kind of more about this in a second. But customer entitlements too, right? Where you're setting up this product and you're setting up these pricing rules, naturally there's this extension into, well, this customer gets this amount with this package. Some sort of entitlement gets defined. Whether it gets enforced is enforceable from that product is an open question. But there you will hear many monetization solutions say, we have entitlements. Rating may be the hottest. This is why I sort of visually tried to make it pop out a little bit. But rating is the hottest topic at the moment. Where are the rate tables for your product and how you monetize consumption? What is the guide map for your usage rating? Which system owns it? Many solutions in the monetization stack have the capability to create a rate table and define those usage attributes. And of course, like anything in the era of SaaS, is reporting and dashboards and data analytics. We're all analytics companies, every single one of us. So you'll see, and sort of what analytics they focus on, how they distribute it, how they surface it for you. That will be is certainly an area of overlap. So important when you're navigating the system, these systems or these vendor conversations, to kind of recognize that the way that they might be talking about this is confusing, sounds alike. An area to dive in to say, what do you mean when? And we're going to give you a guide to do that in a second. Right now. So let's bring some clarity to this. Like one of the things we're going to focus on 3 essential categories that are necessary for monetizing effectively today as we transform our monetization models and transform our products. And the way that we're going to do that is to use this handy dandy kind of index card. I'm just going to introduce the structure really quick, and then we'll dive into it, which is to say, some of the key questions that you ask yourself that I think is helpful to ask oneself when navigating a cluttered technology landscape is, okay, I'm navigating a technology category. How do we define? What are the core functionality? What are the core pieces of this category? If they don't do these things, they don't belong in this category. They can't be called this. What is the core definition of this category? Okay, now that we understand that, when they say we support usage-based monetization, what do they mean? What is the lens or the angle through that they're coming at this problem? How do we understand that? And usually it is by understanding the use cases for usage-based monetization that they support. Then it is, okay, when the business problems, when a solution isn't usage friendly, what are the common problems that kind of surface? What are the things that illustrate for us that we need to either augment the solution or move to another one, or where you prod the vendors to say, what are the business problems you are solving, distinct from other vendors in your category, distinct from the vendors adjacent to your category. And then when you see vendors doing it well, what do you look for? What's the functionality that should exist? And importantly, who are the buyer personas who have a stake in the business problems you're solving? So let's use this. Let's put this in action. Okay. So billing solutions. This is a lot of text on this slide, but hopefully it's more for you to sort of take it and use it later. But primarily, billing solutions are solutions that determine the value that is owed to or from a buyer and maybe another party, right, in a marketplace or a reseller scenario. But it's this kind of calculator of what is owed in the business model. And so when we think about a billing solution that supports usage-based monetization, what they mean is that they have billing logic that supports usage. So it has rating plans. They might even be sophisticated rating plans. They might even enable hybrid models, but it's that calculus, that calculation of that value owed can have as an attribute usage and consumption. The core piece is rating logic. That is the core piece, but it's also the ability to compute that usage, ingest the usage data, and which may or may not be raw. We'll get to that in a second, and actually spit out an accurate bill. When they're not usage friendly, you'll often see you'll feel the pain very, very distinctly, which is I actually can't bill for the way I want to price. There's a disconnect. But sometimes, because usage has been around for a while, a lot of companies have rating logic, will have some usage and consumption, but maybe they don't support the number of attributes that must be considered in order to rate the thing. So multi-attribute rating, right? Is it time of day, day of week? They may not support the cadence with which you need to rate or bill. Are you real-time streaming and you need to monetize in real time? Or is a monthly batch okay, right? Where that's the pain that you might get there. The other thing is that how much of the rest of the sort of billing or monetization actions can be triggered based off of usage. So you might have sort of problems on the periphery, as I like to say, right? You might hit usage record limits, or you can't re-rate, or you can't use usage as a trigger for discounts or alerts or other things like that. And so these are kinds of the problems that tend to arrive if there's sort of it's kind of two buckets. One is if you literally can't bill for the model that you want to use, or you have these sort of peripheral problems where you can't use the usage in a way that you want to for other monetization related events like a discount, right? So when they do that well, they usually have some native, what we call mediation, or it's a famous telco term, but this concept of taking raw usage data and just giving it a treatment for billing purposes, which is primarily what these guys do, right? They make it ready for billing, and then they pass it through the billing system to make it possible to bill on that usage. But the difference between good and great here is how technical is that job? How difficult is it to do? Or you might find good to great, right? How do they handle non-billing related usage data? Is that accessible? Is it treatable? How do we do these periphery things like discounts and alerts and rev rec? So you're looking for folks who kind of do that well, right? And most of the time, this is office of the CFO. There might be billing ops. Certainly, tech cares because this is sensitive data and compliance issues. Sales cares because they want to be able to sell the thing that they want to do. But primarily, it's the office of the CFO, right? Now, when we think about specialists, these are folks that sort of have emerged the most recently in the world, like mediation specialists or usage data specialists, usage data management. This category has grown tremendously as monetizing usage has become more popular. So what is it? It's a solution that provides kind of infrastructure, even though sometimes they balk at being called infrastructure solutions. It provides infrastructure and capabilities to kind of manage raw usage data. It applies those treatments. It does some of what the billing solutions do, but with an absolute laser focus on using usage data to the max. So sometimes it is for monetization, sometimes it's not. I'm getting to what good looks like, getting ahead of myself. But essentially, it is this solution that takes and manages raw usage data, applies treatments to it, prepares it for consumption by the rest of your enterprise applications, and routes that data to those locations. And that's why I think of them as slightly infrastructure focused, is that there is this piping that has to happen, and this to enable the rest of the solution to be able to consume the solutions to be able to consume usage data. But when they do it well, or when they what they mean is essentially doing that. I don't think there's a ton of confusion here, except that maybe, there might be, there's no good definitive name for this category yet. So they might be called usage data mediation solutions, usage data transformation solutions, usage data management solutions, like I have them here. But what they mean is essentially what they are defined to do. And those treatments are kind of where the magic happens, right? How do you normalize the data? How do you enrich the data? How do you couple or decouple those raw data elements? How do you distribute it? How do you make it easy to consume and relevant to consume for the rest of the business applications? Where you might have problems here is volume. They can't handle the volume of your data. They can't handle the velocity with which you need to manage or compute that data. Or you need to be able to treat your data in a specific way, and they can't do it. The treatment, right? Those data treatments, they might have gaps there for you. When they do this well, I think you do have to match. I kind of think about the number of attributes that must be considered in order to rate a piece of usage, how frequently that usage needs to be rated, and how much volume you have. If they can match all of those things, that's what good looks like. And often, yes, the CTO cares about this. Yes, billing cares about this, but we start to get into the product teams because the usage data for the product, as we've talked about, has become more interesting for AI companies and SaaS companies. And finally, last but not least, Michael, is the category that Revenera plays in, is the entitlements management solution. And this solution it is essentially the definition is defining and enforcing the user permissions and that access to the digital products and how much of that digital product they have access to. And it has to do that in accordance with agreements that have already been made or with the billing and payments model that the company uses. when an entitlements management solution says that they support usage-based monetization, they do have it's a similar to the billing solution in that it's like you either can do this or you can't do this based on your model, right? How does it sort of enable or enforce the usage and consumption in the way that your model and your bundles and your product allows? It is about the enforcement and governance and management of that usage of the product or service. It has tracking, it has auditing, it has analytics about the actual kind of distribution of the entitlement. The I love the word entitlement because it's like you are entitled. This is for you, and it delivers that, but also has the capacity to kind of clamp down when necessary. And so when they think about the challenges, but it may be that you can't sort of enable access based on usage in the right way, or you can only do usage on X type of product, not Y type of product, or there's you can't blend, it's only usage and you can't blend this other type of model, or it is again about sort of mapping to the model you want, but it's really about that place with where engagement with your product actually happens, right? So what you look for is that sort of allows or blocks features in real time. It is really of the moment that the entitle or that engagement with the product happens, that it has elements to mitigate abuse, because as we see with AI companies, like free trial abuse and kind of new forms of abuse are popping up as we try to or we try to get controls so that we can get a better sense of cost or manage our costs better, right? That kind of compliance piece is a big part of this, and analytics. I think this is where things really start to shine here too, which is how are my customers actually using my product? Not this broad usage, like they have used it, but what are they using? That kind of insight into the feature set, the actual, again, boots on the ground analytics for how the product is being used. So this is what you're looking for in entitlement solution to do well. And here the buyer personas overlap in that product, of course, is a big part of this, but compliance is also a big buyer here. I want to give a second, Michael, anything I missed here, anything you want to double down on, just because this is your bread and butter?
Sure. I mean, earlier, you mentioned, the company that had blown through their AI budget for the year, early in the year. And yeah, you need to have guardrails to almost protect your customers from themselves. But you also want to provide them with some transparency. You want to provide them with visibility into what their usage looks like. And this is where it shines. As you said, you have those analytics to show, yep, this is how much we're using, but also if it looks like we're going to exceed, how do we have that conversation? What guardrails can you set at the group level, at the individual level, things like that.
Yeah.
But also understanding what the value is, right? And then adjusting your rate table within this system to say, you know what, we want this feature to have a little bit higher adoption. Maybe let's have that be fewer tokens than these other things. But also, we really see where the value is that we're providing to our end customers. So yeah, guardrails, compliance, visibility, and then feeding that usage data back into your rate tables to make those adjustments and iterate on your pricing models. Yeah.
Well, and we're going to talk more about that too in a second. So yeah. I want to dive into some of the overlaps, right? Just to highlight, the kind of differences, just to shine some light on this, right? So when we say usage data management, when a billing solution talks about it for billing purposes, not for other purposes. They're managing usage data in order to bill for it. When they talk about rating logic and computing, it is a core focus when they support usage models, and it will be biased towards their customer, their industry specialization, the kinds of ways you can rate or the ways in which you use that weight usage will be biased towards their industry focus. And yes, you probably could set entitlements rules in billing solutions, but there's never enforcement. Very rarely do I see, but in fact, I don't know of a billing solution that can also manage enforcement. So then when usage data management talks about usage data management, it is a core focus for billing and often non-billing purposes, crucially. When they talk about rating logic and computing that rating, it is really designed to then be ported over to a billing system in order to then be billed. They don't often go all the way into billing. And again, you can manage it, you can sort of set entitlements, but you really can't enforce them. And then when an entitlement solution talks about usage data management, it is for entitlements management primarily. It is about ensuring that the access to that product is in compliance with the way you've wanted it to be, the way you design it to be. And again, when rating logic is there, it is, again, designed to be ported over to the billing system to take across the finish line for billing. And crucially, entitlements rules can be set and enforced. This is a core focus of this category. So wrapping up here, what should you do today? And I think that this is, we've harped on this a little bit, but I think that the pricing strategy is really important before you think about the pricing models. We spend a lot of time talking about pricing models here because this is our bread and butter, and we think about, or I should say my bread and butter, and when I look at the billing solution and the monetization technologies, I'm always about, can this model be supported? But the pricing strategy cannot, it has to be the first step. And my colleague Lisa Singer at Forrester, all respect and credit due to her, she covers pricing. And in fact, I think some of her research is being made available to you too in the docs section. Do check it out. But she has this really helpful framework. She calls it this AI maturation or AI maturity pricing horizon. And it's helpful because it has this illustration that sort of has the attribution clarity, the value attribution clarity is on this y-axis, and the x-axis is about the autonomy of the AI product from, kind of what we see mostly today, which is kind of assistive and guided, to all the way of these autonomous AI agents that everyone loves to talk about. And so what does it mean? I mean, when we think about setting up your pricing strategy and what it enables for determining the models, is that it's not all products have clear value today. And that's okay. That's okay. It's not necessarily a business breaking problem. Because things are quickly moving and we're launching new products, and sometimes we need to understand the usage in order to understand what customer, we might have a philosophy of what the value is, and we need to kind of test and learn. But the more clarity that you can provide around the value of your product, the hours saved, the cost avoided, the resolution, time reduced, or whatever it might be, the more observable, the more quantifiable it is, the more attributable it is, the more likely you have flexibility to monetize in more ways. With the x-axis here, same thing. When you have autonomy, that your product has some degree of independence or capability for decision making, with less human intervention, the higher autonomy, theoretically, we're still working on this, but theoretically it reduces human effort. So it maybe increases scalability, the possibility of scalability, and then linking more the kind of outcome to the software itself. And so what you see is this kind of, the more observable, quantifiable, attributable the outcome, the greater the range of pricing models, and the when it's diffused, when the values you make, like with assistants and with co-pilots today, like a simple flat fee may be necessary until you have better telemetry, until you have better information about how your customers are using your product and how valuable it is. So my last piece of advice here is don't price ahead of your measurement capabilities. That's the big takeaway, right? You want to be able to base your model on what you can observe, what you can validate, and what you can tie back to your customers. So next takeaway. Determine where to start your search for better monetization tech if you're having challenges, right? Based on your business and problems and based on your sphere of influence. I'm revisiting the kind of index cards here, but surfacing, hey, here are the business problems that you're likely to have if you're experiencing, or the ones that are most palpable or measurable, or the ones that feel most urgent are about product setup restrictions, or about using usage events for other sort of billing triggers, or it's bill runs or super error prone or labor intensive. Maybe you need to start with a billing solution. Maybe the problem lies there. If you have sort of usage processing limits, or they're throttling it, or your processing timeframes are too slow, or you can't apply the appropriate treatments to that usage data, look to the specialists, look to the usage data management solutions. And then finally, if you have, you can't actually track consumption data, or you can't enable kind of access to products in real time based on purchases, if you don't have configurable enforcement, entitlements is the way to go, or the place to start. And you can use this card to help other areas where there is a lack of clarity. The final and juiciest point here, and I don't want to take us over time too much, but I thought that this data was interesting. And by the way, this is a work in progress, but I think that you can justify investments or assess your existing partnerships based on your priorities, not just on the business problems. The bulk of this has been, oh, what business problems are you having? How do you start, stopping the bleeding? But when we look at the data and we say, there's a lot, we're going to dive into this. You don't have to read this all right now. But when we ask product managers, what are your business priorities today? And what's your team going to focus on? That's the dark green bars here, right? We want to be data driven. We want to be more customer centric. But when I slice this data by the companies who have no AI in their product or have all AI in the products, you can see the deltas here. The spread is pretty significant. There's massive differences. And I want to dive into these really quickly because I think it illustrates sort of the different priorities of AI product companies or AI product teams and non-AI product teams. This is the top 5 priorities in a list for companies that have no Gen AI in their products. That's the left, that turquoise, and all AI companies. So what do they have in common? Well, in their top 5, both want to understand customer needs, right? For non-AI companies, it's first. For AI companies, it's fourth. They both also want to become more data-driven, right? This is a top priority for AI companies and a fourth priority for non-AI companies. And both want to be more customer-centric. This is where we have unity and harmony. We both want to be customer-centric, and it's both kind of equal priority across companies. But where are the differences? And I think that this is where it gets juicy. So what I think it does is demonstrate a difference in alignment. So non-AI product companies, they're more focused on organizational alignment, right? Forging stronger alignment with functions in marketing, engineering, and sales, bringing the product management team in alignment with the rest of the organization, and also figuring out the strategy, focusing on our strategy, fortifying our strategy, thinking about our strategic focus. When we look at the AI companies, they're elevating product teams to, the purpose, and setting their foundations for adaptability. So when second on their list behind becoming more data-driven is empowering our product teams to be the primary driver of customer and business value. And what's on their list, the other thing that's on their list that's not in the top 5 for non-AI companies is establishing and nurturing best practices for portfolio management, product development, and lifecycle management around our products. So what I think what that means is that we see companies who are using usage and and sort of, if they're AI companies, but they're monetizing based on consumption today, and they are maniacal about understanding the value, or trying to understand the value that their product brings, that the priorities shift to that adaptability and the kind of purpose, the better alignment of the product with customer value and with business value and the teams behind it. So the last point here, just to put the icing on the cake or the cherry on top, is what I think that the AI companies have understood is that usage and consumption pricing, and importantly, the insights that come from it, is a big unlock for software companies, for product teams, if we use it in order to do a number of things, not just necessarily for, let's say, pricing, and getting an accurate bill out, which is important and hard, as we say, non-trivial. But when we see sort of the future, what I think we're looking for is using usage insights to make that value of your product observable to you and to your customers, and more easily attributable to your products. And only by understanding your product usage can you get there, right? Or at least it's a critical part of that formula. Yes, we wanted to use our usage insights, actual usage of our product, to improve pricing, to improve package on a continuous basis. That's that life cycle management that those AI companies are trying to unlock. And then let's use our usage insights to prompt creativity and experimentation for outcome-based monetization. As we're figuring this out, as if we can attribute value, well, then maybe we can start monetizing based on outcomes. And there's also strategic reasons. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but having an outcome-based model doesn't mean all of your customers will buy based on that outcome. There's some talk now of outcome-based pricing being like the good, better, best, and outcome being the best, and helping people get to that hybrid model better. Anyway, and then so we could use those insights to prompt that experimentation, prompt the research and the necessary answers to questions before we jump into outcome. And the other thing is inform our product development, inform creativity as it relates to where our product, what features need to be in there, how it should evolve. That is what AI companies have understood and are understanding more and more, and dedicated to understanding more and more. And part of that, I think, inspiration is the fact that they have transformed their monetization, or that monetization flexibility is part and parcel to their survival. And so, but these are the lessons I think we can all take from AI companies, but also from the data that we've gone through today about kind of the reason why it's important, even though it's hard, to consider usage-based monetization because of the insights that it may deliver for you. So there's that. Thank you. I'm so excited to have gone through this with you. There's a lot to unpack. You'll get a copy of these slides, certainly, but let's keep the conversation going. I would love to hear from you. You can find me on LinkedIn. But yeah, maybe we have a few minutes for questions. What do you think, Michael?
We said roughly 45 minutes. I know that you and I are way too passionate about these topics that we are ever going to stick to the timing. But so first off, thank you, Lily. Always a great conversation. But if you look across all the data that you shared, what do you think is the biggest misconception that companies still have about monetizing AI?
That we haven't
is it all the work you have to do up front? Yeah. I mean, I suspect that's.
Yeah, I think that it's messy right now. I don't let anyone tell you that we've got this figured out, or there's a silver bullet here, or that one solution is going to solve all the problems, or that even the AI companies have it all figured out. I mean, I think what the velocity of change in their monetization is a signal for how we're still learning. And I think that it partially is because the technology is changing so quickly. So like, how do we monetize when the fundamental product is shifting? But yeah, and I do think that there is there's maybe an underappreciation for the challenges of billing, the messy middle, and then the compliance piece, the like back office piece of this, sales can be really, really creative. Product can be really, really creative. And we still need to be able to like recognize revenue appropriately and stuff like that, and comply, and clamp down on piracy or stuff like that. So
yeah. And I do think it sort of underscores the importance, once you've done all that work up front and then have to iterate it, your ability to implement that in your system as quickly as possible, right? You've done all that hard work. Now let's get it to market as quickly as we can. Really important aspect of it, and making configurations in your product, software monetization product, to do that versus, oh my gosh, do we have to recode our whole application now because we built it ourselves? But that's a different webinar, different topic. If folks are interested, we do have the Forrester Total Economic Impact Report available in the Docs tab as well. Let's see, I do see one question. If you think you can answer it quickly, we'll do it. But you mentioned that rating is the hottest topic right now. Any common questions or themes your clients are asking about rate tables, and what should vendors be aware of?
I think that it's an interesting one. Usability is big. So yeah, I can create the rate table, but how hard is it to do? Sometimes we actually seen a lot of don't hate me, Michael. One of the things that comes up is like, one of the features that was most satisfying for a group of customers was the ability to upload an Excel sheet as the first version of the rating logic. Because guess what? They're so used to using Excel to set that rating logic. They just want you to translate. They don't want to use Excel, but they want you to speak Excel so that they can just upload that, right? And so I think that the usability piece is something that is underappreciated here. Like, shouldn't have to be a super technical user to set it up. And also we have to be aware of kind of what would make the day in the life of someone who has to set these rates or modify these rates, or and that goes into the rating and re-rating process later on. The usability of that is something I think is underappreciated on the vendor side.
Yeah, and I will say, if anyone in the audience has questions about that, certainly reach out to us, because shockingly we do have rate tables built into our solution, and lots of ways of slicing and dicing things. But Lily, as always, thank you so much for sharing your experience, your survey data, and your insights. It is always the highlight of the year, getting to talk to you and getting your perspective. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's so fun. You always ask the best questions, and you're not scared of jumping into a messy topic. So it's really always fun to work with you.
Well, and I think you're still working on a report where you'll really dive into sort of the technology around quote to cash. Very much looking forward to seeing that. We won't make promises later in the year. Yeah, stay tuned. Stay tuned. Watch here for details. And thank you to everybody in the audience for joining us today. As always, please be sure to reach out after the webinar if you have any follow-up questions, things that you thought about on your drive home, or work from home to the kitchen.
To the coffee refill.
Thank you all for being here. Yes. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And we will see you soon. Take care, everybody.